Hello guys, it's Pete from MyJewelryBench.com. Today we're going to work on this beautiful Hampden watch. It is in very rough condition. I want to thank James for sending it in for a restoration, and we're going to do what we can to see if we can get this thing working as perfectly as possible. This watch has seen a lot of years, probably left alone and unwound. It had a plastic crystal on it, which was probably replaced in the mid to late 50s, and it has yellowed and allowed dirt to get into the watch. So we're going to go and open this up, do a complete service and a complete restoration. So I'm going to try something new here. I'm going to give you a little bit of history as much as I can on this particular watch, and I'm going to go into the history of the Hampden Watch Company and how its storied life has changed during its lifetime. It is no longer in existence, but that is the case of many American watchmakers. So this particular watch was produced sometime in the maybe second quarter of 1909, and it was produced in Canton, Ohio by the Hampden Watch Company. At the time, it was the Hampden Watch Company. The Hampden Watch Company started life in Rhode Island as the Mozart Watch Company. Then it moved, or actually it changed its name to the New York Watch Company, which you'll see many watches come from that same era, in Providence, Rhode Island. Again, it changed locations in 1867 to Springfield, Massachusetts, but retained its name. And again, changed the name of the company sometime in 1875 to the New York Watch Manufacturing Company. Hampden Watch Company came into existence sometime around 1877 or 1878, and it was located in the Springfield, Massachusetts area. It may have been, its assets may have been purchased and then changed the name from that point. It changed the name again sometime in 1886 to the Hampden Duber Watch Company, and then became the Hampden Watch Company of Canton, Ohio in 1888. Later on in its life, it became the Duber Hampden Watch Company sometime around 1922, 1923, and its assets were sold probably during the Depression in 1930 to a Soviet company, or at the time a Russian watchmaker. So I imagine the Depression took its toll on Hampden, and all its assets were eventually sold. Now here you can see I'm taking off the bridges. I've already removed the balance cock and the complete balance system. I've already taken out the escapement, and now I'm just going to remove the mainspring bridge. That's an important part of this watch. The mainspring seems to be very powerless. It does run the watch a little bit, but this watch has a lot of issues, as you may have seen during the previous couple of minutes of the video. There's glue all over the face of the main plate, and I'm not sure why somebody glued it in there. The dial feet work perfectly, and the dial screws hold the dial in. So why somebody put glue in there, I'm not exactly sure. It could have been as a result of somebody maybe or possibly gluing down that plastic crystal, which is a no-no. Those should be pressure fit. Now here we're taking out the train bridge, and out with it comes the main gear. So we're going to take that main gear, put it aside with all the other gears, and those will be cleaned individually. And there's the mainspring barrel. This has a ratcheting wheel on it, so we'll take that ratchet wheel off and put that aside. And again, keep all your parts organized when you're doing this. Now here you can see, if you can get past the focus of my thumb, you can see that I'm trying to scrape off that glue that's on this, and we'll kind of skip a little bit past that. Now I'm just going to tighten in the dial screws so that they do not fall out during cleaning, and I'm going to examine all the jewels on this. It's a good idea whenever you're looking at a watch that you take a look at each of the jewels. There is one cracked jewel. It's not terrible. It doesn't have any nicks in it, just a little crack through it, so I think we can get away with keeping that one. If it was a balanced jewel, either a cap or a whole jewel, I'd change it. Now we're opening up the mainspring barrel, and you can see, maybe you can see because of the focus here we go. The mainspring is in pretty bad shape. It's pretty dirty, and it's a little worn out. You can tell by those ridges in the mainspring, the discoloring. So we're going to pop that out and put in a new one. And let's not forget that each piece should go into a basket by itself. And here we've got a clean mainspring barrel, and I've got a new mainspring in the mainspring winder, and we're just going to set that in place. It's always good to find the exact replacement. However, certain mainsprings of watches in this era will work with other brands of watches. So just find the one that has the right tension and fit, and 99.9% of the time you'll be fine. You can make a little minor adjustment to the timing of a watch if the mainspring has a slightly different tension. This is a T-bar end, so there are a couple little holes in the upper and lower portion of the mainspring barrel, so make sure you get those lined in correctly. And I'm just going to give this a little bit of oil. Again, I oil typically in mainspring at 3 locations plus the bottom plate. Then we'll get that pinion put in place, the arbor, and make sure that's seated onto the mainspring in the little hole that actuates the mainspring. And then we'll get the cap ready and put the cap in position. Again, there's a little notch on the cap that goes into that T-bar end of the mainspring. So if you're going to do this, make sure you just match that little notch in there correctly. Sometimes you can squeeze these with your hands. Sometimes I have better luck with most every watch except for an Elgin, which I might have to use a pair of parallel pliers. So I'm going to put that ratchet wheel back in, and we'll get this mainspring barrel seated correctly into the watch and get it ready for assembly. I'm going to put some light oil on the clutch, and we'll put the clutch in position. This is a set clutch because this watch does wind by a lever set and not by pulling the stem out. So James, just remember, if you're watching this video, don't pull that crown out because it's not going to do anything. Now I'll get the train all set in place. And I typically start with the lowest setting gear or work my way up to the highest setting gear in the train, and then we'll just make sure they all seat in position. It's very difficult to test your gears while you're doing this, but sometimes you can, depending on the fitness of the watch. This one's giving me a little bit of a problem. It doesn't want to seat correctly, and that happens once in a while. There it goes, falls right back into place. Sometimes just lifting it up, putting it back, and you're good to go. Now we'll put the train bridge back in, and again with the focus, you got my hand in focus and not the train. There we go, it's better. And we'll start setting all the pinions into that bridge so that each gear is seated correctly. A little bit of wiggling, very, very light pressure. Don't push down on anything because you can break these parts easy. With that bridge in place, we'll get the screws set in place, and we will gently tighten them down and then test and adjust if we need to. So I want to cover a few things about what I found in this watch, because this watch turned out to be a little bit more work than even I anticipated. So one of the things I found with this watch that I did anticipate was that the mainspring was probably shot, and I already had the mainsprings for this particular model watch, so that's not a problem. When you wind a watch, even a watch that's been sitting for a couple decades, and it wants to tick, that's usually a good sign. But I found a couple things in here. First, the pallet fork, one of the pallet jewels was broken. So I ended up replacing the pallet jewel. I also found that somebody had replaced in this watch's lifetime one of the gears that did not fit this model. It somewhat worked, but didn't work perfectly, so I replaced that. And the balance staff was broken, so it just had a slight fracture in the tip. I ended up replacing the entire balance staff, and the balance jewel that was in the on the balance was actually bad also, so I put a new balance jewel in it. I did find a couple instances where the watch had some, you could see where it was previously repaired, and most of that revolved around the balance cock, the upper balance jewels, and there was some damage to the balance cock itself. So modifying this back to its original condition or its original position actually made the watch run just about perfectly. So now, with all that work done and a brand new crystal, a brand new set of hands, this watch does work pretty good. So here you can see I'm giving this a test wind, and I'm just going to make sure that the train works with the new mainspring, and you can see it does. I usually test it like that. It's not going to do any damage to the watch. Some people do that, some people don't. I'm going to give this a light oiling on the pallet fork, and here we're putting the pallet fork in. Again, remember, whenever you're placing the pallet fork into a watch, a wristwatch, a pocket watch, no matter what it is, just be cautious because this is one of the most delicate pieces of a watch. And we'll get that screw in place. That screw is the easier one of the two bridges for the pallet fork. However, the other one I'll struggle with, as you'll see in a moment. And again, I'm going to tighten this down, but I'm going to leave it loose, and then I'm going to test everything. Once that's seated correctly, I can move on to the second screw. And you can see this is in an awkward position, and getting that screw in place took me probably about 5 minutes. Now we'll throw the balance cock and the full balance assembly back into the watch, make sure it's in the correct position so it'll beat. And I'll put that down. We'll give it a little test and make sure that it spins. And there it goes. Hey, look at that. It works. It's a little off kilter here, but this was before I realized that the balance cock was bent in a bad position. So we just had to make that change and that fix. And once I did that, the watch ran perfectly. I did not do that repair until later after I had assembled the whole watch. So we still had a little bit of bowing on that balance wheel, but I did correct that later. So it looks like my filming skills are improving a little bit. I'm able to get the watch more in focus instead of focusing on my thumb, and I hope you guys appreciate that. Here now I'm working on the face of the watch. I'm going to get the hour wheel inset, and then we'll put the washer, the dial washer on, and then we're just going to get the dial set. Now here you can see there's still some dirt on the dial. You know, 60, 70 years of dirt and grime getting in there. I couldn't clean it any better than I did, but it is a little stained. But James, I hope you appreciate the fact that it's still in good shape. There's no chips or cracks on it, just a little staining. Now we're working on the second hand. The second hand is usually the first hand I put on, and then I'll do a quick little test to make sure everything's seated correctly. And now I'm going to move on to the case. Now this case is brass, and it's nickel plated or chrome plated, I'm not sure. This was not the original case with this particular watch. At least not that this era watch would have come with either a nickel silver case or a case that was in better shape. Now here you can see, if you can look past the focus of my thumb, I'm scraping off the glue that was put on this case when they put the plastic crystal on. And this is where I think the glue from the that was stuck inside the watch came from. Somebody did a really bad job of trying to re-glue that. So now that the case is cleaned and lightly buffed up, I can't buff it up too much because I will take off that chrome plating. So we're going to get this watch cased, get the frame set, and I'll put the two screws on. These are half screws, so you can tighten them all down, make sure everything is aligned correctly, and then tighten these screws up. And at least 2/3 of the screw will catch against the lip of the case and hold the watch in place. And yes, my focusing skills have improved. Okay, so now that that's done, I'm going to put the back cover on the watch. This is a pop-off case. It's not a screw-off, so you know if you're curious, these squeeze together, and I'm just going to squeeze that in there. And now we'll put the new hour hand on. This hour hand sits pretty good. This is a lever set watch, so that lever has to be pulled out to set it. And don't forget to push it back in before you put the front cover back on the watch. I usually set my watches to 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock when I'm putting on the minute hand just to make sure. And now I'll run through a quick test and make sure that all the hands are free from each other, that there's no rubbing, there's no place to catch. Because sometimes when assembling a watch, you can get these hands and they'll catch with each other and cause the watch to stop. So here's that ugly plastic crystal. We're going to get rid of that. Just throw that across the room and get rid of it. Here's a new old stock glass crystal, and this would have been appropriate for this particular model watch. So I'm going to get that cleaned up and snapped into the front ring. And now that that's done, we can snap this front cover on and see what the watch looks like. Looks pretty good, guys. I think that came out well. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below what you think of this particular watch. If you like the way I did the video also, please let me know, because if you want a history of each watchmaker and the companies that made these watches, I'll be glad to do them for you. Well, I'm kind of hoping that when James gets back his watch, he's happy with it. I think it came out really, really well. It runs very good now. As soon as you wind this a couple turns, it'll start ticking on its own, which is always a great thing for a 110-year-old watch. Guys, if you're not subscribers, consider subscribing to my channel. I'll put a link in the description below to the playlist for pocket watch repairs so you can see other watch repairs, things like balance jewels and balance staff replacements, things like that. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with people that you think might be interested. Every little bit helps my channel grow, and I appreciate all the help that you guys have given me in the past year and a half. So take care and happy watchmaking.